my wife were like, hey, you know what? Let's just hang out Christmas as a family, and then we're going to start getting our house ready to sell because we don't want to live in this community anymore. My mindset was, okay, there's some great people out there that are willing to stand up and do the right thing, but most people are just going to do nothing and say nothing. Am I going to sacrifice my family because most of Canada will say and do nothing? Well, and then the convoy happened, and you see like this massive momentum building as it comes across Canada, and you see like this huge train of vehicles, and everywhere they go, there's just massive crowds receiving them as they're making their way across Canada. And it just starts to buzz, right? Like everyone is talking about it. Okay, there's way more of us than I thought, right? Like way more of us out there than I thought. I had no idea that I was wandering into this group of people that's gonna like try and like basically host this massive convoy of trucks and vehicles coming across the country. I was just like, and so I'd go out and check things out and see what was going on. And then I would come back to the Swiss to be like ready to go for the day. I was probably averaging maybe 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night. Forever grateful, man. Like, I've said it before, and it always gets me a little, but I will never forget what they did for me and my family, ever. So, I'm forever in debt to them. December 15th, I officially resigned. Me and my wife were like, hey, you know what? Let's just hang out Christmas as a family, and then we're going to start getting our house ready to sell because we don't want to live in this community anymore. And then the convoy happened in January.
Okay, so what do you mean this community anymore?
Well, the town of Russell, where we were living.
You were going to move out of the town?
Well, yeah, I mean, we had pretty much decided that we were definitely leaving Russell.
And where were you going?
Well, Alberta.
Back to Alberta?
Alberta, or
because that's where the family, like your
yeah.
Okay.
Alberta or leave the country. Those were the options we were discussing.
Let's talk about, because I want to get into this convoy part really bad, but I can't. I'm willing to make sure, if you don't mind, I'd like to try and get some of the crumbs, I guess, so to speak, before we get there. And that's a very good point when it comes to moving out of country, because I actually know a few people who have moved.
I know a bunch.
And I know of a few people who have moved and they've returned.
Yeah, I know a couple like that too. Yep.
And I have actually thought about it, and I don't know what to make of it. Where do you go? What do you do? And at the same time, not only where do you go, what do you do, what's better, but in running, do you think it's going to be, what happens a year from now? Do you think it's going to be any better? And then if not, where do you run? And then now you're that person who's always running. It's like it's like going from one job to the next. At a certain point, you gotta, if you're gonna, the way I look at it, and I think this is where it came to a process of, I guess, figuring this out. And I don't know if you're a little bit more in the same place, but if you're not willing to take the vaccine shot, and you're not willing to take that other stuff that you're willing to be able to kind of keep your job and whatever through signing documentation because of principle, then in the fact of moving and running is almost, can you do that? Like, if you're going to say no, it's on principle where you're going to have to stand and fight. And the only way to put out a fire, you got to be that firefighter. The only way to put out a fire is to be the firefighter. Most people are running, but it only takes a small handful of people to put out that fire. And it's uncomfortable. But if you're going to make a stand, why not make a stand in the country that you're from, where all your friends and your family and what you know and value is, for the betterment of trying to actually stand your ground out of principle, right? I mean, and that's a process that is hard to break down and make sense of. I mean, I say all of this in a way where it's not to demean one person or another. It's just a conversation. And this is one I really grappled with a little bit myself. I had this place appraised. Not many people know that, but I wanted to know, I was like, if I'm going to think this way, the only way to make a rational decision really is to absolutely understand what all the options are and what it entails to be able to do each one of these different options, because it's a lot more than just, I think, a option that I have in my head without a full understanding of what that actually entails. So to move to another country, you know, I couldn't figure out what's better and how do you get there, and then to liquidate and start over. And then in that process, I actually started to have a better sense of appreciation of what happened to a lot of those people who were forced in a position where they had to immigrate to Canada, and, you know, my grandparents and all those people who had gone through all of that. And I was like, this is the best country on planet Earth. It's to fight for, and to run is disrespectful for the veterans in a lot of ways who were put in worse positions. And then that's how that whole process that went in. But for you, like, what was that like? Because that has so many different moving parts, you know what I mean? Like, I tried to hit on them all, but I mean, that just scratches the surface. As I think the process and the thought pattern that goes into trying to really understand how you kind of go about making that decision. Right? Does that make sense? Did I?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if
No.
You know, sometimes
Yeah,
you just question whether or not what you're saying is understood.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. So, where pre-convoy, my mindset was, okay, there's some great people out there that are willing to stand up and say say what they see and do the right thing. But most people are just going to do nothing and say nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Am I going to sacrifice my family because most of Canada will say and do nothing? That was my mindset at the time. So I was like, honestly, let's put on a good show for the kids for Christmas, and then we're out of here. Like, out of here could have meant just coming back to Alberta, because I knew, like, I could have a place to live and work out here right away. But you're seeing all the things that are happening, and you know that we still didn't know how bad it was going to get, right? Like, things were incrementally getting worse at that time, because nothing really put the brakes on any of it until the convoy.
Yeah.
And then, and then the convoy happened, and you see, like, this massive momentum building as it comes across Canada, and you see, like, this huge train of vehicles, and everywhere they go, there's just massive crowds receiving them as they're making their way across Canada. And it just starts to buzz, right? Like, everyone is talking about it. Well, everyone in our circle anyway. And it's just like, okay, there's way more of us than I thought, right? Like, way more of us out there than I thought. So I've already been in communication with a bunch of different, like, let's call them freedom groups throughout the last few months of, like, speaking out and, you know, talking with groups on Zoom and going to the odd, like, speaking event in person. And I get a phone call from a group in Alberta, and the one guy who I know pretty well now, he's bringing a whole bunch of, like, doctors with a Canadian connection, right? Like Byron Bridle, Eric Payne, Paul Alexander, Roger Hodgkinson. They're bringing, like, Julie Panesi and Brian Peckford, like a bunch of big name, like, freedom people in Canada, right? Yeah. To, like, they're bringing them to the convoy. They're going to be, like, speakers to the people, like what ended up being on, like, the big stage truck. And so we had a couple of other police, like ex-police officers, myself, Vince Gerses from the former like retired OPP, Brian Dennison, who left the Calgary police, same reason I left the RCMP. And basically we're going to run like a bit of a security detail for these doctors and Peckford and Panesi. And because Dr. Francis Christian from Saskatoon as well. And because a lot of them have like been threatened a lot for the stuff that they've said publicly, right? A lot of them have had like they've been harassed and they've been threatened, and you know they have like legitimate safety concerns, especially if they have their family traveling with them. So that was going to be like our little volunteer security detail for them, right? That was initially what I was supposed to going to do for the convoy, because that's like, it's the trucker show, right? Like I just want to be here. I just want to see it and take part in it. And I get a phone call on the Wednesday night, I think, Tuesday night. Convoy started arriving Thursday night. I get a phone call from my friend Bethan Nodwell. She's been really involved. She was really involved she was like the MC of the stage truck at the convoy, blonde woman. If you were there and saw the stage truck, you would have saw Bethan. And she's been like just constantly going with freedom protests and events, and really involved with like the Christine Anderson tours in Canada. And, she went over to the Dutch farmers, everything.
Wow. Crazy.
Bethan calls me the Tuesday night before the convoy shows up, and she's like, we need your help with like security and stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll come. She's like, we're meeting tomorrow at my house. I'm like, okay, well, I'll come meet at your house. Show up there, and like there's a handful of volunteers that are like just like racing all over the place. And I basically find out that this guy and his wife had been in communication with some of the convoy people like Tamara already, and that they had volunteered to like basically receive the convoy, like be ready for them to arrive in Ottawa. Yeah. And like, we're going to provide them transportation. We're trying to line up like places that truckers can stay while they're in town, organize like food, like basically like, how are we going to feed these guys, transport them, shelter them, on the, to and from the protest every day kind of thing. Yeah. Like laundry, showers, all that kind of like the basics. And like, I had no idea that I was wandering into this group of people that's going to like try and like basically host this massive convoy of trucks and vehicles coming across the country. I was just like, I thought you just needed like my opinion on like.
It started with you just coming over.
Yeah. I thought you just wanted to like pick my brain about like security and policing and stuff like that with big protests. But anyways, I was, all amazing people that were just willing to try and do whatever they could to make this run smooth. So I was like, yep, okay, I'm in. And so I called back to the guy in Alberta and I said, look, like, I can't really help do like this protective detail, but like, I'm sure Brian and Vince and others, like they'll have it under control, but like these people really need some help. And because I had been like so involved in big event planning from the policing side in the national capital, right now in the national capital region for like Canada Day, Remembrance Day, I was part of the planning for like the police tactical planning side of all of those things for years. I was like, okay, like I'm kind of uniquely experienced to help you with this, because I know I have a pretty good idea of like what we can expect from the police.
And that's invaluable information. Well, just that whole, I think, what to expect.
Like it's not like I knew what their exact plans were going to be, but I think the most value I added was that I was able during the convoy, like I was able to kind of sift through, like we were just getting bombarded with information, like all day, all night. My phone wouldn't stop ringing, text messages, people running into the room and just like holding their phone up to my ear and being like, talk to this person. And I'm like, I have my little headphones in, like I'm on a conversation already. I'm like, who am I talking to? And was just trying to sort out like, okay, what's legit? What's BS? And then like, okay, whatever sounds like it could be legit. Okay, well, let's see if we can send someone over there to go like check it out in person to try and validate whether that's actually happening or that actually happened. And so you could kind of call it like, I kind of call it like triaging information to find out like the vast majority of it, like,
you're just filtering out the nonsense from the important
and the
information.
Vast majority of it turned out to be nonsense, in my opinion. And like, but there was definitely things that we were getting called about that did happen or were happening. And plus, I ended up talking to all the different police force liaisons. Like, I wasn't the only one, but I was definitely like communicating with them a lot. And so I was trying to portray to them that, like, look, we all agree that this needs to stay peaceful and that we're going to try and, like, do our very best to work with you because, you know, the goal of the convoy was to end the mandates. And so we want to put pressure on the government, but we also know that we don't want to, you know, we don't want it to, like, devolve into something that wasn't intended by the convoy, kind of, you know, the convoy leaders, for lack of a better term. And so we're trying to keep an open communication with the police, triage all the incoming information to determine what was true and what was bogus. And then if there was anything that came in that sounded like it could legitimately be dangerous, then we're passing that info to the police right away. Cause it's like as soon as I hear anything that makes me go like, what? I'm sending that to them right away. So they know it's like, hey, we're calling you with this. This is not us.
Like, I see. Yeah.
Right. It's like, it's making them aware for public safety, but it's also like a layer of protection for us.
Exactly.
Right. It's just like, hey, you're hearing this from me. Yeah. This is what I'm hearing. This is your job to investigate. Right.
Yeah. Were you able to document a lot of that?
All of it.
Yeah. Good.
Oh yeah. Like I made pages and pages and pages of notes and emails and text messages. Like I kept all that stuff. Well, I mean, as much of it as I could. And then that was all submitted to like the legal team for the public inquiry.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Emergencies Act.
Yeah. And then I think the other thing that I probably provided value was like, because I knew what I expected to see from the police, like I knew that they were going to pull in people from different police forces. I knew that we were going to see tactical vehicles. I knew that we were going to see snipers on rooftops. Like when people would be like panicky because they've never been there, they've never seen that before, I was able to be like, no, like chill out.
Put a sense of calm in something that's very unfamiliar.
Right. Because a lot of people that were there had probably never been to Ottawa, had never seen like an RCMP sniper up on a Parliament building.
Yeah.
Right. But it's like, that was my old job. I did it all the time. Right. And it's like, it's no big deal. Like I seriously.
Waving to the guy. Oh, did you know any of them?
Oh, for sure.
Ooh.
Yeah. But it's just like, yeah, I mean, like I would be up on that roof just because the PM was raising like a rainbow flag on the lawn of Parliament Hill or something. Right. Like, they did it all the time. It was not like, it's like, chill out. They're not there scoping you with their rifle. That's not how they operate. They're not like looking at people through the scope of the rifle. Like they're up there, they got their gear. They're just watching the crowd to look for anything that could be a threat. Right. And not just a threat to them, but a threat to the crowd. Right. Because like we live in a world now where people will walk into a massive crowd with a weapon and just start injuring people.
Absolutely.
Or they'll drive a van through a crowd of people, right? Or a big rig through a group of people. So those are all things that in my old job, I had to think about and watch for and even try and plan for. So, you know, even when we'd see, like, you see some videos of like an Ottawa police officer standing, I think it was Ottawa, standing beside like a bunch of like those steel canisters, and everyone's like, oh, they got explosives and stuff like that. I'm like, chill out. The riot team, yeah, it's tear gas. It's they have that stuff with them, because if this turns into a giant riot, they need to have that stuff on hand to like start dispersing the crowd, right? Like, it's nothing to panic about, right? So I think I helped.
I think you absolutely would have, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. So how did that go now with being able to filter out? Like, one day to the next always seemed to be a bit of an extreme unknown. This is what's happening. Tonight's the night, or nobody has phone service in the middle of, you know, on Wellington, or there's a lot of tactics.
Problem, actually.
Yeah, all these different, you know, elements that were happening. Was that difficult to try and filter that out? Because everybody seemed to be on edge, especially during the week. And then the weekends would come, and all these locals that were so opposed to, you know, the convoy seemed to disappear, and it was flooded by locals.
Supporters. Yeah.
It would be overwhelming. And then it would settle down, you know, during the weekdays. And of course, that's where a lot of the pressure seemed to come. And nobody really knew what was happening at night, you know, whether there was going to be a raid or... So how is that to manage and try and filter through some of that information from one day to the next that kind of evolved into 1 week after another?
Well, it was tiring, because I didn't, myself and a lot of the people that I was, like the other like volunteers that I was working with, like, we didn't hardly sleep. Like, and, you know, trying to get people to do volunteer shifts overnight, it's not easy.
No.
So
no, not at all.
So I would end up doing a lot of nighttime stuff myself. But it was good, because I didn't even mind it, because it got me out of the Swiss, right? It got me out of the hotel where we were working out of. So like, quite often my day would consist of like, I'd get up, I'd be out walking, like walk like almost the entire perimeter of like the convoy area, except for like the long stretch down by Sir John A. Macdonald Parkway. Every now and then I'd venture out there, but usually with a vehicle, if I could get someone to drive me out there. But I'd almost every day, early in the morning, like 4 a.m., I'd go walk like the whole perimeter, and maybe like a couple of the cross streets through the downtown core where the majority of the trucks were.
Yeah.
And just like see what was going on, right? Because in my experience, if the police are going to do a big operation, it's usually early morning. And so I'd go out and check things out and see what was going on. And then I would come back to the Swiss to be like ready to go for the day. And then, you know, those things I talked about, I thought I was kind of like my main functions. I'd be doing that all day long. And then, you know, like random other things would come in that, I might help deal with. And then, late at night, like usually like 11 o'clock or later, I'd go back out and do like another big like perimeter type sweep.
Huge days.
Yeah, they were long. Like I would guess the first 2 weeks for sure, I was probably averaging maybe 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night. And then it got a little bit better that last week, because it just seemed like we had more help. But I was still doing like those, that I probably did more of those like perimeter walks that week leading up to the EA being invoked and the takedown, because as soon as the Emergencies Act was invoked, and you saw what happened like prior to that with the takedown, and, you know, they dismantled it in Windsor, the big takedown that happened in Coutts, I was like, okay, it's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So did you have an idea of like what was actually happening? Did you have a chance? So you walked the perimeters, but did you know what it was like as far as on Wellington during the day? what was needed, what wasn't, you know, the logistics end of it, or were you a little bit more into trying to be the liaison between the convoy and the different elements that you're talking with, whether it be OPP or whoever else?
I did get out sometimes during the day. The first few days, hardly, not at all. But then I kind of tried to make a point of like to get out and like go walk at least like that Wellington stretch in the middle of the day. So I kind of just a little recharge for me even.
Yeah.
And just to see it and experience it. There was, I don't really feel like I had a whole lot to do with like the other logistics of what was happening, like the stage and the entertainment and the speakers, the food and everything that was happening on Wellington. Like that was either other volunteers or the people that were just there were basically taking care of it all themselves.
No, it was pretty much, yeah. It was based off of the, you know, maybe the block captains and just individuals. People would just kind of put things up on their own. I don't think that was organized. And I don't know for sure for a fact, but it sure seemed like it because where we were, a lot of that food, especially on the outskirts, was just sheer overwhelming.
Yeah.
And didn't know what to do with it. And you couldn't
just
say
started
no.
handing it out.
Well, you had to.
Yeah.
In not taking the food and taking what a lot of people were giving you, it was disheartening, you know, because people were so emotional and wanting to be a part of it and try and show some form of support, that to say, no, you can't take it would be like almost
taking away their
it's
contribution.
Insulting. Yeah. Like, so then you take it no matter what. And okay, so now what do you do with all of these supplies? It's just way more than anybody can deal with. So then that's how it started to filter into, you know, all these great big cook stations. And I mean, we can look at I'd love to show you a couple of the videos. And the reason I asked if you've been down there during the day is because I don't know. I know there's a pile of footage out there, but I got some different videos that I took of all the food. I'm telling you, the mountains of food.
Oh, it's crazy.
There'd be an intersection full of food.
Yeah.
And it was just for everybody to just grab. Nobody cared how much you took or what you took. And some of it was cooked, some of it was not, you know, everything under the sun. And then it would filter into where people had too much to be able to cook and give to people that were there.
Yeah.
So then it went to the homeless shelter, and then they couldn't take it. So then it went to staging areas, and they could take all of the stuff, you know, and it just became almost overwhelming. So the food was being given out out of necessity, because the other factor that not a lot of people were aware of is that what do you do with everything going out? They wouldn't allow washrooms.
Yep.
So you have all these people and kids and adults not only staying in their trucks, but where do you go? You couldn't go into businesses. Porta potties where you needed a permit that they were just not willing to give out. So if you put a porta potty up, they would take it away, and then they'd, you know, videotape, you know, if somebody was trying to, you know, urinate, because, you know, you got people and kids dancing in the middle of the road. They can't go anywhere. So it was like, and then the garbage, there was zero garbage there. Where they took this stuff is beyond me. I don't know how they took, like, there was nothing to really pick up. I don't know where all of these plates and all of this stuff went.
That I know about.
Where did it go? How did they, because that was a massive.
One of the guys that was doing all kinds of like field logistics type work as like a volunteer, was he just took it on himself to like organize like a few different like centralized garbage collection points, and then we would like, and then he even organized like the city coming to pick that up.
Oh,
so he organized the garbage collection and the city to come pick it up,
because they had garbage bags hanging along some of the fencing and whatnot. But I've got a video that I can even show you of this this guy who's just picking it up, and it was right after a busy weekend. And I was kind of talking to him or whatever, and he said, yeah, this is the only garbage that I have. I've been cleaning up for 2 hours.
Yeah.
everybody just took what they brought in, or there was no garbage anywhere. It is absolutely amazing, especially with the amount of people that were there.
Well, I would say that's probably the vast majority of what happened there was just the people that were there on the ground. Just they saw something that needed to be done, so then they just got together and did it. Like, I can't take credit for hardly any of it. I know some people there's been some kind of discussion, I think, within like maybe some of the policing community that like, and even the media tried to paint it that way, that there was like all this high speed, like former military and former police, like people, you know, running the convoy. And I think like they're trying to imply that like people like me and Tom Marazzo were like these mastermind strategists. It's like, I wish I could take credit for the jerry can thing, where like the jerry can march happened.
Yeah.
That was something that we actually talked about when they started seizing fuel. But like that just happened. People just did it. Like we never put the word out to be like, oh, hey, everyone just needs to start. Like that kind of was just something someone said as a joke after we heard about people getting arrested and jerry cans being seized. And then like before you know it, there's like hordes of people just swarming downtown
with
carrying
jerry cans.
like, some had fuel, some were empty, some had water, some people had like juice and were like drinking out of their jerry cans. So like that just happened. I think that's kind of true of the snow shoveling as well.
Yeah.
Like I think it mostly started with the war memorial, and then it kind of just spread to the city street, like the sidewalks and stuff as well. People just started showing up with like shovels, like extra snow shovels from like Canadian Tire or whatever.
Yeah.
And they just started like chipping ice and shoveling snow. And the next thing you know, like some of those late night walks or early morning walks I told you about, there'd be people like shoveling sidewalks.
Yeah. Oh, it's unreal. Unreal. Actually, if you want, I'd like to show you a couple of those videos. So here's a short little video of you know, this guy. That's all he did. He's clearing the snow off of the street. Here's one of
here's another example of how the community's coming together with all of this food. Started out with just one case of bottles, and it's just started to accumulate. And there's some chips over here. There's a truck with some chili that everyone can just eat. I mean, we're talking chocolate bars, and there's everything you can imagine here. Salt.
Toilet paper.
Toilet paper.
Potatoes.
I mean, there's so much here that...
For kids.
What is all in there? Kid stuff.
Games for kids.
Wow.
Suckers for kids. Hand warmers, oatmeal.
And this is just one of many that you come across walking down the road. It's amazing.
throw a couple other ones here. This one here, actually. Nothing really exciting happening here. He's put the snowpow's got some signs in it. Oh, there you go. Oh, there's quite a crew here. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Good.
Where are you from?
We are 3 hours away. We're just Brighton, Ontario.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm Kevin
Oh,
from BC. Jara.
Hi, good to meet you.
Yeah. You guys are all one big happy family
We're
here.
just getting here.
Are you?
Yeah.
Can I ask you, just I guess because the family, is this something you wanted to share with everybody?
We had to come. I don't think I could have lived with myself if we didn't come and experience this.
Yeah, that's awesome.
100%. This is history in the making right here, and these guys need to be a part of it. They need to see it. 100%.
Great on. Well, I'm going to keep going, but I couldn't agree more. That's awesome. I'm glad you guys are here.
You came from BC?
I came from BC, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you with the truckers?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah,
Right on.
yeah, we're set up about 10-minute walk. I mean, that's the stuff that I got. Look at some of this stuff here I wanted to show you because they were saying how violent it was. And one of the things that kind of resonates is when you see kids, bouncy castles, because it wasn't, they were saying that it was being irresponsible parents. But a lot of these parents, like what we just talked about, were wanting to share this with their kids and show them that, like, this, there was nothing violent about this at all. I mean, if this is a version of violence,
No, I wouldn't have let my family go down there if I thought there was a chance of violence.
no.
And oh, by the way,
keep in mind
the streets were barricaded off to protect, basically turn them into giant pedestrian streets.
So is that what that was?
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, so what's irresponsible? Like, you do that on Spark Street, 1 block south, like almost like every day of the year. Like, it's just a giant pedestrian
whistle
street.
stop.
So they essentially just turned Wellington into another
pedestrian.
Spark Street.
Yeah, that's. There was another one here I thought I'd show you where all the truckers were getting a photo.
And I went through that crowd earlier, and I would hate to be short. Man, that was a hell of a walk. Look at this, though, eh, guys?
Actually, I'll show you this. They're singing the national anthem.
You want to trade places?
You know what happened before that?
That was with the tent, yeah.
Oh,
I've got that's this here.
Police took a tent down?
Yeah. So what happened is they circled these people that were trying to put a tent in the middle of the road. So they circled them, and I think in this video here somewhere it shows, that's why I went to that vantage point, because they made a big circle around the people that were trying to erect the tent, and then they had a couple officers in the center, and they were addressing that until they were able to finally get them to take the tent down, and then the crowd was able to get those RCMP off, or those cops to leave. But if you look at...
Is that where they were all like chanting like shame, shame, shame?
Yeah, and they were
Okay.
singing national anthem. This one here is...
So this, what's going on
talking about what I
here,
was just talking about.
is that video I showed where they had to take this the tent down
Oh, okay.
and walked away. They came back a little bit later. Now they're setting it up a little further down the street. There's a bit of a presence here at the police, but nothing's happened yet. They're over there. There's a small group of them. There's a few more down over there. Over there, but
I do remember the people that were like kind of organizing the food storage, like trying to put messages out there like, don't bring anything more. And if you do, make sure it's non-perishable.
Non-perishable, and then you wanted to make sure that we don't have to... There's quite a few here. But anyways, does it still have an impact on you? Like, do you kind of reminisce on that? And like, what are your thoughts now looking back on that?
Well, like we mentioned before, it's a major moment in history. I know that eventually it'll be accurately reflected in I don't even want to call them newspapers or whatever might still exist then. You know, it's been vilified by mainstream media and by the government. They're still lying about it today. You know, Jody Thomas, the former national security intelligence advisor who has no background or experience in national security or intelligence, was on CTV recently, repeating the same lies that have already been proven false by the Ottawa Police's own admission, by the OPP and RCMP's own admission. You know, something increasingly violent. Tried to connect it to what happened in Coots, hearing talk about guns and trucks, which we know that that's all BS, right? Like that's all been testified to by multiple police witnesses in the House of Commons, like at committee and during the public inquiry. But like I said before, evidence doesn't matter. They just keep repeating the same lies over and over and over again. But anyway.
It's wild how that goes unchecked. Do you feel that Emergencies Act inquiry had any kind of value? Did it bear any weight? Because you testified in that, and so what was that like? Do you think that was just something that was just an act and it was a process of wasting everybody's time, or was there any kind of value with any of it?
Well, it's written right into the act that has to happen within a set period of time after the act is invoked or revoked. The outcome was what I expected it to be, you know, try and give a report that seems somewhat balanced, but ultimately side with the government. But the thing that I kind of predicted coming out of that is I kind of suspected that Rouleau would ultimately support the government's decision to do it. But after it was so abundantly clear from all of the different police agencies and CSIS testimony that the convoy did not meet the threshold of Section 2 of the CSIS Act to invoke the Emergencies Act, I knew that one of the before the testimony was even done of all of the convoy supporters, like watching the police testimony. I can't remember if it was Eva Chipiak or if it was my wife that I leaned over and I said to, like, watch, one of the recommendations that comes out of this inquiry is that they're going to amend the Emergencies Act so that it's not so limited to Section 2 of the CSIS Act is the criteria that has to be met. And I'm pretty sure that was one of the recommendations, is that perhaps they have to expand the criteria to invoke, like justifying the invocation of the Emergencies Act to be, you know, expand it beyond just the strict criteria of Section 2 of the CSIS Act.
So what does that mean? That gives them the ability to invoke the Emergencies Act easier?
Yeah, essentially, that's my opinion, yes.
Wow.
Or that, like, maybe there's certain circumstances where...
So if they were able to invoke the Emergencies Act for something like that and they want to make it easier, I mean, what's the threshold then?
I don't know. That's to be determined. But thankfully, we did have that federal court decision recently saying otherwise, which I think that has more teeth because that's an actual court decision which has like more binding power, which is like, whereas the commissioner of the Emergencies Act, his recommendations, they're not like legally binding, right?
No.
Just like all of these other public inquiries, all these recommendations come out. None of them are legally binding, and hardly anything ever actually gets actioned.
What is your perception now with where we sit? What do we do? What's our political landscape looks like? What are our options? I mean, there's a lot of things now that seem to be even a little more alarming in some areas than even before COVID, like with some of the stuff that's happening with our healthcare. On a little bit of a side note, it's kind of, I think, ironic that they put so many resources into COVID and mandating everybody's health, but right now our healthcare is completely collapsing. I mean, there's no attention, as far as I can tell, to our healthcare. But everything, like, where do we sit now, and how do you think we can get involved or make any kind of positive change to kind of correct the direction we seem to be going in right now?
The system, I suspect in 2024, and this is not just me pulling this out of thin air, like a lot of people that I talk to that know way more about the world than I do, it seems to be a consensus that like there's going to be major systems collapsing in 2024, 2025. I guess the advice that I've been trying to follow myself, and when people ask me that question, is take care of the essentials and make sure that you have like a reserve. We talked about that, right? Like food, water, shelter, adequate food, water, shelter supply. Fuel is a big one too. Financially, you know, if you're your own business owner, great. But at the very least, like I'm trying to make myself as independent from the big systems as possible, right? Like I want to interact with big banks, big healthcare, police, courts, all of those things, absolutely minimal as possible. I want to try. I don't want to be a hermit out in the woods. Sometimes I do, but I don't. I want to avoid giving my time and attention and money to people that don't support freedom. So there's other banking. So financially, there's other banking options out there, right? Yeah. So, I mean, you can talk about cash, precious metals. Some people are really big into crypto. But one thing I do recommend for people is to try and find like a bank that is as pro-freedom as you can get. And so like in Alberta, I think the no-brainer option is the Bow Valley Credit Union. That's kind of the freedom bank. I don't think they exist outside of Alberta though. No.
I think we might have a credit union that's about
as
remote,
close as you're going to get.
We've had some in Fort St. John anyways, we've had some really bad experiences with them. So I don't want to speak to that on everybody, but yeah, I guess there's some research that has to go into it.
Trying my best to be as like debt free.
Yeah, that's an ongoing struggle, isn't it?
It is. But you know, the light is at the end of the tunnel. I try and support, like for food, I try and support as local as possible, right? Like we are trying to find like direct sources, right? So meat, eggs, produce where we can. Like I try and avoid the big grocery stores. Prices are inflated right now anyway. I'd rather, even if I have to pay a little bit more, I'd rather pay that directly to a farmer. Yeah. Like someone who's producing the food.
Absolutely.
Like, here's a direct exchange. I know exactly where it's coming from. I know what's in it. Yeah. It's not pumped full of like hormones and chemicals that I don't want. And then it's like, I feel good. Like he's not getting like 10 cents of that $5. He's getting the full $5.
Exactly.
And I'm getting a quality product that I feel good about. Sorry, I'm kind of bouncing all over the place here. I'm just trying to like spew these ideas out as they're coming to me. Again, on the finance side, multiple streams of income seems to be like a big thing I hear from a lot of people who are like pretty savvy business-wise. Because I learned that mistake the hard way. I had all my financial eggs in one basket and then chopped off.
Done.
Oh, yeah. Now what do I do? So left me scrambling. Community is huge, right? I think it seems like up here in Fort St. John area, you guys have a pretty strong freedom community. I mean, from what I've seen from attending events, like I think that's great. You're definitely, if things get real bad, like whether it's economic collapse or World War III or whatever, like you're going to have to rely on each other because there's going to be major disruptions to like infrastructure and supply chains and whatever. Even if you're not directly involved in the conflict, you're going to notice it. So, yeah. Basic essentials of life, create as much independence as you can from the big systems, and build your community. Oh, and then obviously, like, the biggest thing that I think that is the simplest thing is just like, if they try and push something that you don't agree with, just say no. Like, have the guts to say no, I'm not doing that. And then, so all those other things I talked about how to like try and disconnect from like the big systems, that's all giving you, if you can get yourself set up well enough, then you have the ability to say no because you're not dependent on all of those.
That's just
right?
it, for sure.
It's like,
yeah.
How about you just, no matter, my goal is to make you and your opinion irrelevant in my life.
Yeah.
So you can sit there and try and implement whatever control mechanism you want to bring in next. I'm going to be over here living my life with my community of like-minded people. Stay over there and leave us alone.
Yeah, definitely. Don't try and stay out from under somebody's thumb.
Yeah.
It's easier said than done in some cases, for sure. But
everything
I think as long as you're mindful of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we should probably start wrapping it up a little bit. Is there anything that you want to touch on that maybe we need to wrap up? Any loose ends? Anything you want to mention?
Just referencing like our legal system. I think it's nothing new, but it's clear to me that there is two distinct standards of treatment and punishment in Canada right now. So you have the revolving door that we've all seen for years and years and years regarding like people who are, you could kind of say more like traditional crimes or like serious, like actual violent, dangerous offenders.
Yeah.
Like the slap on the wrist, don't do it again. You like, here's this piece of paper, please abide by the conditions on it. And then there's like the absolute hammer for anyone who's been a COVID dissident. Well, it's true.
It is.
Right?
It's so true. For sure.
And I'm sure that will probably become the same if there's ever big protests about like, impending climate lockdowns or whatever, right? Government dissidents get the hammer.
Yeah.
Whereas like legit, violent, dangerous, bad guys get like
revolving door.
Out you go.
Yeah.
Against my better judgment, I'm going to release you. Please don't go murder someone. So I think knowing that, I personally, in regards to the legal system, it's like outside of the stuff that I'm already involved in, my goal is to avoid contact with the police and the court as much as possible.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I mean, understandably, it's not going to be obviously fair court judgment, is it?
Well, I mean, I think we've seen enough to know that if you're a dissident, that you don't get treated the same. But like, for example, there's some things that you just have to have contact with. Like if it's the police, for example, you get into a car accident, you're going to have to deal with them, right? If the healthcare system, like I don't want to deal with them if I don't have to, but obviously if there's like emergency medicine required, well, then I'm going to have to. But I'm going to do whatever I can to avoid those scenarios.
Yeah.
Without living in like a little bubble. But that's probably not really saying anything too groundbreaking for people. I think just having like a simple plan of what do I want my life to look like and how am I going to actually start like doing things right now that's going to get me closer to that every day, that will take a lot of anxiety off. That it does for me anyway. Like, even just the fact of like having a place to live and working full time has been a massive improvement from where I was after the convoy. Because I knew that I was like selling my house and I was unemployed and I had no idea where I was going to live and what I was going to do for work. So those two simple things, I mean, it didn't feel simple to get there, but just having a new place to live and new job has helped me a lot to just like feel like a little bit of the pressure come off.
That is a tremendous amount of pressure to have to deal with. Things are going smooth and it's come around then. I mean, it's been a couple of years since the convoy, so you've mentioned you got a career and you've made a move. Was that more of a recent thing, or did you find it a little bit of a problem to try and kind of get reestablished?
Well, it took time, but I mean, it's because it took us a long time it felt like it took us forever just to like get our house sold and leave Russell. And then we came back here for a couple months, and then we went traveling for pretty much a winter. Like, we took our kids to Costa Rica, and then we hit Florida for a little bit, and then we went back to the Ottawa area, and then we finally came back to here to kind of like on a more permanent basis. So we we've been back here full time since September.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Good.
But we did.
Wow.
We had an extended trip away.
I'm sure well deserved, and it was a good way of deflating, wasn't it?
It helped.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to do some shout outs, because that's probably gonna there's in this this part, we kind of touched on it earlier. The shout outs are probably gonna take, a couple of minutes. What I'd like to do though, while we're doing those shout outs, if you'd like, is I got a little whiskey, and I've got these white oak cups if you want to take a splash of whiskey.
Oh, I'm sure we could have a little celebratory.
We'll send that over.
A little celebratory sniff.
I happen to have. Oh, and your gift. Oh my goodness! I didn't do this. I broke my protocol. There you go.
Oh wow!
That in there has the mugs and all kinds of graph. Yeah.
I already got my wristband.
I see that. Well, thanks for coming out. You know that I really do appreciate it. I've been wanting to talk to you about this for quite some time, and
Sweet cup.
it's a bucket list guest, eh? Well, thanks. I'm glad you like it.
Oh, thank you.
This is a pretty good whiskey here. I hate having to pronounce this Bella Venue. I think that's what it's called there. 12-year-old.
Belvenie.
Belvenie. Oh, yeah,
Belvenie.
Belvenie instead of ooh.
Belvenie.
Larry Newfield. Thank you, buddy, if you're watching this. That's from Larry. And this has got, this is white oak, and it's charred on the inside. So do you like your whiskey with a little bit of ice in it, or? Let's take a splash like this, and then what I'm going to do is
What's this called? Neat?
Yeah.
With no ice?
Neat. No ice, if you want to pour that. And then if you really want, we can do a smoke. I've got a smoker. We can do like I've got actually
Smoke your drink?
Yeah. You want to try that? Actually, let's do that. Let's smoke it.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Are we done?
No.
Oh, okay.
Keep going.
Okay.
Here, we'll take a sip first. Cheers.
Cheers.
Wow. Actually, you know what? We're not going to smoke that. We'll smoke the next one. That is amazing. Holy.
That's surprisingly smooth for a straight sip of whiskey.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. And I don't know if it's just because I like the fact it's in this white oak mug that's charred, but got it for Christmas.
It makes me feel pretty fancy.
Yeah, does it? So shout outs. This is a shout out kind of because these are to the people that don't normally get the recognition I feel they should.
Mm-hmm.
So I had it in list, but I'm going to jump ahead. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. We talked about the Bikers Church. You have quite a bit of history and connections with the Bikers Church. Before I do my shout out, I'd like you to kind of maybe tell your story about the Bikers Church and your involvement and how you know everybody over there, because they were a tremendous form of support, weren't they?
Yeah. So a lot of things have happened to me in the last couple years where like the exact people I needed in my life showed up exactly when I needed them. And that kind of connects to the whole church and God and everything, where like things just seem to unfold exactly as they needed to right at that exact time. So right before I officially resigned from the RCMP, I came into contact with Melissa McKee, who's Rob McKee is the pastor at the Bikers Church. And so his wife, Melissa, she's like volunteer coordinator there. And then now I think she has a full-time position working there. But I came into contact with Melissa for something completely unrelated to church. And I just knew that I needed to contact her. And because a friend of my wife's gave me her contact. And so I ended up speaking with her. We ended up having this conversation and about coming there. And she just says to me, kind of right near the end of our like intro conversation, she's like, just so you know, we don't enforce mask mandates. Cause that's when all that was still like right in the thick of it. And I was just like, good, I don't wear one. She's like, really? I'm like, do you love freedom? She's like, I love freedom. Do you love freedom? And then that just like, obviously the conversation just moved from there. And so I told her who I was, because I had already been speaking up publicly. And then like the story she says is as soon as she gets off the phone, I think maybe the very next day or later that day, like the very first thing that shows up on Facebook is like a video recording with like someone posted like a speech that I gave. And it's like, she's like, this is the guy I was just talking to on the phone. So she calls me back and she gives me like this little like biblical rundown of what the meaning of my name is. And I think she even like started off like, please don't think this is weird. But, you know, she gives me this rundown of like the biblical name, meaning of my name. And then she essentially asks if I would come speak to a group of people at the Bikers Church. And so I was like, yeah, sure, for sure. I'll do that. And so they're having like a little outlaw potluck at the time. And, I ask if I can bring my wife and kids, and she's like, yeah, no problem. But she's like, but just so you know, it's in Vanier. So it's like Vanier's kind of like a rougher neighborhood of Ottawa.
Oh, okay.
And I'm like, yeah, okay, well, we're going to a church. It should be fine. And as we're driving there, my wife is just like, so what are we expecting when we come here? I'm like, I have no idea. We show up and I meet Melissa in person and her husband, Rob. And there's like, we walk into this room and there's like a significant amount of people there. And all of these people are just like so amazing and welcoming. And that was right at the time where we were like, felt completely ostracized, right? I'd been ostracized from work. We had been banned from the arena. I think the federal travel mandate had just come into effect, right? Like right at the end of November, beginning of December, 2021. So like, we can't get on a plane to go back to, like, it just felt like we were ostracized, but kind of trapped at the same time, right? And we walk into this room full of amazing people who are just like so thrilled to see us and to meet us and to talk to me about what's going on with like the government and mandates and things. And so we have this amazing dinner. The spread was incredible. I get up on stage. I give like a short little speech about kind of like my story. And then there's like a Q&A after people, like, cause I think a lot of people didn't really know what to expect from law enforcement, right?
Yeah.
Or how to even interact with them if
Yeah.
they're challenged about things. And so that's kind of the stuff I was like, well, if this was me, like from my experience and my training, this is what I think the best approach is, kind of thing. And then that turned into going to actual church service that following Sunday, and it just went from there. And anytime we're in the Ottawa area, like from that point until we left Ottawa, and then when we went back to Ottawa, we always spend time with those people and go to that church.
Awesome.
And they're incredible. They were huge. They were a huge personal source. Did I say that? Personal source of like comfort and safety and strength for me and my wife, and even for our kids, even though they're younger, they might not fully comprehend everything that was going on. And man, they do so much good. Like they were huge during the convoy. They were huge for people before the convoy, during the convoy, and ever since.
Yeah.
And like their church has just, expanded exponentially because they were brave and they took a stand and they didn't discriminate against people and they didn't force people to do things they didn't want to do. And instead they just like embodied like what I think a Christian is supposed to be, right? Like it's all about like, hey, we're all broken, but we're going to show you love and forgiveness, and you're welcome here no matter what you're, no matter how broken you might feel you are. And so they have been absolutely incredible. And I've seen firsthand some of the people whose lives they've helped turn around. And like some of these guys have some rough stories, some rough background. And now they're like amazing, productive men who have become like personal friends of mine.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty sensitive, it's not accomplishment, but openness, hitting we were talking about how the woke, I guess, always kind of has a vehicle of trying to have the all-inclusive, humane, loving, whatever vehicle to be able to deliver all of this point of anger and hatred. They've got the actual embodiment of what that looks like for real.
Yeah.
True acceptance, true inclusiveness, true, all of those humane, virtuous kind of aspects that really actually have a positive impact on not only people around them, but humanity in general, that we should almost try and strive to be more alike. And that it comes from that church. And I don't understand sometimes how they can be attacked for it, but they've stayed true to themselves for it.
Because they're dangerous to the ideology, right? Because if everyone lived by the example that they display, then people wouldn't be afraid and they wouldn't like fall prey to the division and hate tactics that we see from our government and our media. And I mean, like, they obviously don't agree with certain things in regard to like the woke ideology. They're Christian, right? So they have pretty strong beliefs on certain topics about like the transgenderism. Yeah, there's more, but I mean that seems to be one that focuses pretty central, or like what's the word I'm thinking of? Like abortion. Right?
Okay. So freedom to pro-life, or like that's
pro-life versus pro-choice.
Yeah.
But like, so their beliefs on those topics are clear and they don't shy away from talking about them, but they're never like,
they don't cast judgment and ostracize you because
they will
of your
love you
own,
anyway.
Yeah,
is what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah,
right. And I think they absolutely embody that idea of like, be the example you want to see in the world, and not just like finger wag and judge everybody for everything that you think they should be. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
I would like to kind of mention that when it comes to religion, I've been raised in a Christian home, and but I've struggled and had questions with faith in general.
Me too.
And I think I think we all do in one form or another. And I don't think it's one to be criticized or critical about it. I think critical thinking, questioning, and trying to feel what's right is what kind of brought us to where we are now. And it served us. Got an instinct. Really, I think there's a lot of value in it. Sometimes if it doesn't feel right, then question it. And not every situation or church or environment is the same from one or the other. And I've always kind of had a little bit of a cautioning, I don't know, I've always questioned it. But having said that, what I experienced, the feeling, the energy in Ottawa during that period of time, I'm not too sure how to try and express or explain it, but the church also kind of had that environment and energy. And if you know how people say, you know, you feel the Holy Spirit and all, look, that's probably the closest to probably the feeling that people are trying to express that I've ever had any other time in my life. It's the weirdest thing.
No, I agree. I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. Like, for me, walking down in the convoy, sometimes going to the bikers' church, and maybe a handful of other experiences have been like, I think I know what you mean. Like, my experience is like, I feel like an intense pulsing, tingling going through my body.
Yeah.
Like it's noticeable. And that's exactly how I felt walking downtown, like throughout the convoy, especially like the first couple times.
You can see everybody felt it at the same time. A little bit of, I guess, an example of that is we were talking about how peaceful the convoy is and how strongly people wanted to protect that. And it became, I think, a symbol, like you were saying earlier, of global, I guess, example of what a real convoy, or not a convoy, sorry, protest should look like. And that was not without anybody having to explain from one person to the next, no violence. That was like the unspoken rule that was at the highest form of importance ever. Like, that was something that you would literally, and the end result is what happened, where people literally would lay down and they wouldn't swing. They would show no aggression because they wanted to make sure they protected the element of it being a peaceful, loving protest. That was without anyone even having to say anything. That was right across the board. And it was because of that feeling. Everybody realized it. Everybody knew it. It was not something you had to explain to anybody. And where else do you get that? In the French and the English, you know, Quebec and Alberta pretty much are polar opposites. And you've seen French, Quebec people and Albertans talking and laughing and sharing stories. Like, it broke down boundaries that, like, I've never seen before. It was amazing. So that's, I think, going back to the church, you know, faith and that element. That's probably the only time I've actually seen and felt something that probably could represent what the essence of faith is supposed to embody.
Well, the word that comes to my mind hearing you talk is pure. People just had like an unconscious sense that this has to remain pure.
Yeah.
Because if we react with violence, then we're giving the devil what he wants.
Exactly.
Right? And like, you can say that that's Trudeau or the media or the government or whatever, right, is the embodiment of that. But had we become reactive with violence and it turned into like a riot or like a massive brawl, we would have given them exactly what they wanted.
Yeah.
To make us look like the crazy terrorists that they were trying to make us out to be. Well, you mentioned David Goggins earlier in our conversation, right?
Yeah.
You ever hear him talk about taking souls?
No.
Maybe we weren't taking them, but we were piercing them.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Yeah. Well, shout out to David Goggins. So I'd like to kind of move on here. We talked about the Bikers Church. Actually, a few other things. Shout out for helping some of the people that I know in the toughest times. Bern Buchert comes to mind. Sheldon is one of the guys that I know who's a block leader that felt strongly about going to this church. Another guy here, Ben Habb, he's with Eagle Vision. He's done a lot. He created that documentary Unacceptable when it wasn't very cool to be talking in any form towards it, and has supported Bern and anybody that's been related to the convoy in a big way. So I'm going to show parts of the website here throughout the episode or near the episode on Ben and Eagle Vision, just a shout out to him. You're a part of a fundraiser for Bern Buchert for the legal fees there about a month ago or so. So,
I've gotten to know Ben and Bern, both a couple of beauties, and Ben did a hell of a job on that documentary. I know he put in a pile of time and work into it, and then had to try and like condense it into something that was manageable for a film. And Bern, along with the other truckers and people that came across Canada to the rescue, forever grateful, man. Like, I've said it before, and it always gets me a little, but I will never forget what they did for me and my family, ever. So I'm forever in debt to them. And you came with them, right?
It's a yes and no answer. Really, I had to take the momentum of it to grow before I ended up going. So I feel bad about that, but
I disagree. You were there. You came and you were there for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
And showing the world the truth, which is exactly what we needed people to be doing. We needed people to just be flooding the world with live footage and videos like you made to show what the actual ground truth was compared to the bullshit narrative that was being pumped by the media and the government. It's a dying industry, and I think that's why they're so out of desperation. They sell nothing but outrage and fear. It's like clickbait, right? It's like they're becoming a version of the National Enquirer without the funny entertainment value.
That's true. Yeah, that is true. Yeah. When you've got farming protests and everything in Europe, and the best thing they have to talk about on the news is our weather, come on. Like, let's go, guys. But Tamara Leach and Chris Barber, of course, going back to the shout outs, that's a given. I mean, and Chris Barber, I will say one thing, because that guy takes it on the chin sometimes with some of these freaking guys. I think he kind of likes it. But I want to try and I'm going to say something here that it speaks to his character. For whatever people think of the guy, you got to look at actions. And Bern Buchert was is having to deal with court cases and whatnot. Chris came all the way from Saskatchewan, all the way to Fort St. John to sit in a theater for a fundraiser so that, because I think he felt somewhat responsible and like he needs to support the people that were involved. That doesn't come from somebody who's just you need to have true, morals to be able to go and actually have that much of a concern for other people and put yourself out to travel. And whether or not you think that's genuine or not, the actions of him, anybody who says that's not genuine, go and do that for someone else. Travel across provinces to just show up for a 2-hour event. Like, that is something that I hope people pause long enough before they cast judgment on him. And same for Tamara, but Chris seems to be in the spotlight a little bit more. And I think people need to stand up and show a little bit of support for the people who are throwing themselves in the line of fire. So, and that's what this shout out's about.
Yeah. Oh, well, it's something my wife and I talk about all the time. Is like, okay, I appreciate support when people come up and like do the little whisper thing, like, oh, thank you for what you did. I'm like, oh, well,
Thanks.
thank you. But the same people can't just get beat up on all the time.
Yeah.
Right. And we need more people to find their voice. Right. Because like we talked about, 2 hours ago or whatever it was, like the public opinion, public perception rules the day right now. It doesn't seem like anything is based on evidence from like the authorities, politicians, police, courts, whatever. They make decisions based on what they think the public opinion is. So if enough of the public is expressing the same view, hopefully they'll adjust their strategy or adjust their course.
Yeah. Okay. One more, and then we will wrap it up. I know we're going a little bit long, but this is important. I want to address the wives and the family members that weren't part of the convoy, but they weren't a part of the convoy because they didn't agree or support or want to be there. I think if anything, they sacrificed the most because and I say this because my wife wanted to be there, but one of the things that happened, I guess, in that is we got so busy, and I know you're very busy, and anybody who was there, believe it or not, was very busy. And they're busy trying to send these videos and whatever was happening from one day to the next. And they didn't know what was going on, and they had a lot of people calling and asking, and there was a bit of a disconnect, and they weren't able to share in that experience like we were. And it caused a lot of issues, even though they wanted to support. I think they felt a little bit neglected, and I want to make sure that they're acknowledged in a big way. I know it got serious for a few people that ended up, their relationships broke up when they got back, just because the pressures of everything up to that point, and then they felt, shafted, for no better lack of wording. But, I think there needs to be some acknowledgement for some of those people and family members, especially the wives and the husbands or whatever that weren't able to go, and it was appreciated. Without that support on the home front, none of this would have been possible. So shout out to them.
Yeah, for sure. We were pretty fortunate. My wife was down there pretty much every day, taking video and meeting people and talking to people, and she did a lot of live streaming. And fortunately for us, we had both of our moms came to help. Wow. Because they wanted to see it.
Yeah,
they wanted to see it and experience it for themselves. And they were a huge help with looking after the kids. And we ended up taking in, I think when we were full, we had four guests in our house that had traveled across from BC and Alberta with the convoy. Wow. Yeah. And it's a good thing I was barely there. I think I spent 1, maybe 2 nights at home for the whole 3 weeks until it was over. Yeah.
Wow.
And I think it was like the first night, and then maybe one more like around the midway point. I think I went home for a night to say goodbye to my wife's family, because they came down for like a week, and then they drove their motor home all the way across, and then I went home that night to say goodbye to them before they left the next morning to head back to Alberta. Wow. Yeah.
Wow, pretty cool. Okay, we'll wrap. Oh, one last one. We're not going to go into too much detail, but Farm Boys, they're local. We got to give you a shout out, guys.
Yep.
We won't go into too much explanation, but if you are in the oil and gas industry in northern Alberta period, I think they stretch all over that province, don't they?
I think
Northern
so.
Alberta, at least anyway, in BC. If you need flush by, rod rig, swab rig with P tanks, so combi units, call Farm Boys. You're not going to regret it. We need to support them.
I think they just got a hot oiler too.
Did they get a hot oiler?
Yeah.
Ooh, fancy. They got hot oiling now too. If you don't know what those are, then that's okay. I mean, but if you do, call them, flood them, fucking stuff them full of money. All right. Okay. It's a wrap.
Sounds good.
It's a wrap. Okay. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
This is history in the making right here, and these guys need to be a part of it. They need to see it. 100%.
Oh, do you? You're local. Well, thanks for the support.
I've been thankful that being done in the most Canadian way possible.
Awesome.
Peace and unity and support each other and come together to
The streets clean. This is mostly from Saturday and yesterday. Unbelievable. I mean, this is hours of picking, and I don't even have any more than, 2 gallons of garbage.